myself anymore. There I am. Oh, Mikey, little technical glitch. I like that.
Yeah, we can do it again if you want.
No. I like it. It's real.
That's film. We don't do take twos on this show.
That's right. Welcome to more Prop Talk. And I'm Chris Call, as usual, again, with Mike Trudel, as usual.
Hey, that's me.
and just, because I'm just like that guy, I don't have to say it, but I'm going to say it. We just did one, and this is our second one back to back. So if we're wearing the same clothes, that's why. Okay, not that anybody cares. Anyway.
People are paying that close attention.
Yes, exactly. You just never know. This whole video thing freaks me out.
We could start bringing costume changes.
Well, that could be, yeah. Right? That's good. Or you could just do half clothes and just swivel. Anyway, so here's my little intro here. As property masters, we are considered the jack of all trades in of the very real sense. Along with the challenges of researching and sourcing specialty props for every kind of character, we are often faced with requests that require additional expertise. The obvious one is weapons that are often require an armorer. Another and often more challenging situation is with food. We have talked on this podcast about the challenges of prop food many times on set. And finally, today we have one of these experts with us. Please welcome food stylist Melissa McSorley.
Hi, thanks.
How are you?
Good.
Yeah, welcome.
Thank you.
Yes. So, Melissa, I could go down and list all your credits, but then the show would be over.
Yeah, there's a lot. There's
Seriously,
over 100.
You've done so much, and so you have a wealth of knowledge. But let's start from the beginning. So what's your training in food style, or not food styling, but in just cuisine?
Well, I actually started out, I think I manifested myself to have this job when I was little, because you should never say never. Uh-huh. And when I was little, I have two much younger brothers, and I had to help my mom cook, and I hated it. And I always said, you know what, someday I'm going to be a doctor so I can afford to have someone cook for me. And then fast forward.
That backfired.
Yeah. And then fast forward to I was in high school, and there was a Teamster strike. And one of my best friends, her parents were both Teamsters, and they almost lost everything. And I thought, I will never work in an industry where people are so expendable.
Wow.
And even though I went to USC and I finished my degree, and I merrily marched down the road and was working at an electrical engineering firm, I ended up here. So I think I fated myself to do that.
Yeah, so you just need to start using that dialogue for yourself. You say, I'm never going to be president of the United States.
Yeah.
I'm never going to be rich.
Well, I'll do the never going to be rich. I don't want to ever be president of the United States.
So you were born and raised in Southern California?
I actually was. I was born in Glendale, and I was raised in Burbank, in the shadows of all the studios. And I went to USC, and now I live on the west side. So technically my world is very small. It's about a 14-mile radius for most of my life.
So you went to USC for?
I have a degree in psychobiology, and I was a pre-med major, and I literally thought that,
you were going for it.
Yeah, up until I was about a junior, and I realized that, the sorority was so much fun, and playing softball at school was so much fun, and studying just really wasn't, and my GPA wasn't where it needed to be.
I can relate to that. I went to college, and I majored in backgammon and bong hits. And that was it.
I think mine was sleeping and eating for the most part, drinking a little along the way.
So how did that end you up?
So working at the electrical engineering firm, we weren't allowed to do any overtime, and we got off work every day at 4:00.
Wow.
And I needed a little something to do to kill time, and besides playing golf, I needed something else. So I actually started taking culinary courses. I always thought I was a pretty good cook. I learned from my mother, and have very Asian, fusion type roots in cooking. But I really needed to learn how to bake.
Right.
And so I started going back to culinary school and taking courses. In the meantime, I leave the electrical engineering firm and I go to an advertising agency.
Okay.
And as I worked my way up through the agency, at one point you become the producer and you do all of the commercials that come through. And we would hire food stylists on top of everybody else. And I would be like, oh, wait, hey, I learned how to do that. I know how to do that stuff. And then flash forward to, I meet Chuck.
Okay.
prop master.
Yes.
And,
we've had him on the show before.
Yeah, we've had Chuck here.
So I meet Chuck, and he ends up having a hard time with a couple of his food stylists that not showing up on time, not bringing the right thing or having the right quantities. And he's like, you are going to become my food stylist because I can tell you exactly what I need and I know you will do it. And so I started doing a little food styling on the side.
Okay.
And you had never done it before this?
Other than being, through classes and,
Right.
Learning how to plate, learning how to bake. And,
Right.
I really did think that I was going to go to culinary school and be the next Martha Stewart and throw the most amazing parties ever.
I'll bet.
But this was never going to be like a living for me.
Right.
So I started doing a little work for Chuck. And then when I left the ad agency, I had a 2-year non-compete. And I needed to go do something else. So food styling was something I knew, and I happened to have met a gentleman that owned an insert studio. And I started doing a lot of tabletop and a lot of print.
Okay, that's the tough part of food styling.
Yep.
So
So
what year was this?
that was in 2002.
Okay.
Somewhere around there. Prior to that, though, you'll see a lot of credits because food stylists were not required to be union back in the day.
Yeah.
And
Not until just recently, really.
And you could do a lot of drop-offs, and I would show up on set here and there, and I was doing weekend shoots. And then when I finally did, leave the agency and really had to throw myself into it, I had a lot of this great tabletop experience. In the meantime, though, Chuck still had a lot of friends in the non-union world, so I actually started propping also. And then you could also art direct and production. You could kind of be the jack of all trades.
No, yeah.
back in
And the non-union
the
world, you usually are.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's a requirement.
And so, but I definitely found myself gravitating towards tabletop and just started getting a lot of clients. And so then that easily translated into going and working on TV shows and commercials. And then the interesting thing is that back in the day, there used to be a loophole that on union commercials, because food stylists weren't technically union, you could work and they would actually pay into the pension and your health and welfare, even though you weren't a union member. So I actually have 3 years more of credit in my history than actually how long I've been a union member. And it was just because I did enough commercials to qualify for those 3 years.
Oh, that's fantastic. So
I started out in commercials primarily because it was the easier place to work non-union.
and did you do any still work?
And I did a lot of still work.
Because that's even more different than commercials, right?
Right. So then with food styling, not all food stylists are the same.
No.
There's tabletop, there's print work, there's commercials, which are kind of putting all that together, but the camera's just moving. And then when you actually get into, features in TV where people are eating and it needs to perform and it needs to be a bunch of other things. And then there's also reality, which I do not do reality at all.
Yeah, okay, that's
those are
good.
the competition.
Sure.
I don't know what any of that means. I don't know what the tabletop or print work. Can you break that down a little bit for us?
So print work is when you're seeing things in magazines and it's a static shot. And literally you might have 6 hours to set up that one perfect shot of whatever it is. I just finished.
Is that when you're spraying like a lot of it with hairspray and you put a lot of chemicals and stuff in it because no one's ever going to eat it?
Correct. And you just want the perfect look. So I just did a print shoot for a coffee company, and it was all about their beans and their roasting, and it was beautiful. And I mean, we spent hours placing all the beans in the exact perfect spots, so it looks like they just fell that way that I hadn't placed them that way. And it's a really different way of working with the camera when you do print work.
Yeah, it's very intimate. For sure.
And it's a really small crew, and really kind of everybody sort of, does 2 or 3 different jobs, and it definitely is a different feel. But that's where I started, and it was very, very particular. And people were, the photographer was your critic, and the client was your critic, and the agency was your critic. So it was really a good way to sort of
it's trial by fire for sure.
Sort of learn. And then in commercials, when you start, it's the same idea, but, now the camera's rolling on it, you still have the same thing where you have the agency after you, you have the client after you. And you also have all their guidelines to go by.
Right.
And, still make it look beautiful. It has to still match all of the way they do their things, in their restaurants or in their fast food places, or even what they put into their frozen food box. And then TV, when, then moving over into this world, it wasn't as bad. I wouldn't say as bad. That's the wrong word. It wasn't as difficult when I first started, because I didn't have to worry about gluten-free, vegan, keto, Mediterranean diet, sugar-free, all of the various allergies that people have.
Right.
And now it's become, we're almost like, short order cooks for everyone.
It's crazy.
Flipping it all out, so that everything.
And it all needs to look the same now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's always the challenge, right? And I mean, so we'll get into that for sure, because that is kind of like part of the art of what you do. Is creating food to look like one thing, and it's something completely different.
Right. And it used to, and it was a lot sorry, back up there. It was much more difficult back in the beginning, because they didn't have like all the gluten-free products you can, go to now, and all the vegan restaurants and all these things that are available as resources now weren't then. So, 20 some odd years ago, when you tell me that they're eating a vegan pot roast, you're like, oh crap, I got, this is something I have to deal with. Or, as simple as there would be, I had a food scene like 20 years ago where they needed, the mom was making a meatloaf, except you don't want to have an actress putting her hands in raw hamburger.
Right.
And so to come up, now if you want to do that, great. You run down to the market, you grab some Impossible Burger, boom. It looks amazing. It looks like it's bleeding. It's gorgeous.
Definitely.
I had to rice can after can after can of Spam to make it look. And I mean, it probably took me 2 days to come up with enough
and it
to
smelled
do it.
Beautiful.
Yeah. But it, it wasn't going to have all the same, contaminants. So
is that what it is? So it's like having the actor put their hand in raw meat was like because of the contaminants?
You don't want them putting their hands in raw meat and then touching everything and other props, and you have all kinds of other things around. You don't want that contaminating your.
You should have her wash her hands in the scene. Anyway,
Smart.
All these things.
And raw chicken, or whatever.
Raw chicken. That's a horse of a different color, but yeah.
And so there, things that were really difficult before are really easy now because of new products. But then we have all different requirements now.
But do you think that it seems to me that people have a lot more dietary restrictions than they did 20 years ago too, right?
They do.
They just didn't know what was making them sick.
Correct, that's true. They either didn't know, or now they know a healthier, different way to eat that makes them perform better or be better in some way. I think over time, people have also learned that you can ask for everything, and you can give it a name. So I did a show, I don't know, it was about 10 years ago. In the first season, this one actor tells me, well, I don't eat sugar, and he gives me 3 or 4 things he doesn't do. And then the next season, he adds a few more things to it. And by the third season, I'm like, dude, why don't you just tell me you are keto?
Right.
And so now we have like a name for it. If you just tell me from the first day, I'll make that right for you. But he would just like read the script and see little things and say, oh yeah, I can't eat this and I can't eat that. And I don't know if actors back then felt as empowered to like dictate what was, how much extra work had to go into a little scene for them.
Right. Well, and I also think that food stylists being more involved in film and television gives them more latitude to do that, because again, when I started, we didn't have food stylists. We slung all the food.
That's true.
Okay. And they were lucky if it was hot. So
that's fair.
I think now they understand that they could ask for more because we have more expertise available to us.
Definitely. And I also think that they ask more of the food now than they used to. And so I seem to have done quite a few shows lately that are set in the future. So, fortunate to have done a lot of the Star Wars things that are coming out. And I did Picard and something called Don't Look Up. And food it's not Earth anyway,
right?
And food can't look the same there as it does currently. So is what can we do to create like future food? So it's a great collaboration, and like even working with you on the Mysterious Benedict Society, right. It was like when you first called, and it was like so exciting. You're like, I want you because it's food as art,
yes,
and every huge thing is going to be like an art installation,
right.
And it was really fun. It was colors, and it was shapes, and it was textures, and every food stylist will take any job they can get. And if you tell me to do a diner or a breakfast or whatever, right. I'll be there to do those things. But when somebody presents me something that, just has to be amazing and beautiful and big and artful, or conversely, I did a show in Budapest with Ellen Freund. I did The Alienist and Angel of Darkness, and the food was from the 1800s.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that.
But food was very magnificent and glorious back then, and I had the opportunity to literally build these huge food towers. So in one of the scenes, it was supposed to be an engagement party for the goddaughter of like Rockefeller or something like that. And we had one that was supposed to be like water and fire and foul. We just had these beautiful food towers, and we just spent days and days building them. And those are the projects like I really cherish and I think are amazing.
Yeah. And it's funny because unless you're in the business, people don't realize what goes into it. Because you think, oh, well, you just get to make these great towers of food, but then those towers of food have to last for sometimes a couple of days. Like we talked to Barry Wilkinson about the Harry Potter series and doing these massive food scenes where tables and tables and tables of food for days and days and days, and just like having to reconstitute everything. So, can you talk about that challenge?
Like for hundreds of background and huge banquet scenes and stuff like that? Yeah.
You have to have a very, very large food styling team with lots of refrigeration. But those are definitely the challenging ones where you're recreating it, day after day. I would say the great thing is that a lot of the fake foods are getting better and better.
Right.
3D printing is definitely coming along, so you can now lay in a pretty realistic looking base to get your real stuff on top.
Will you bring in the fake foods and stuff too then?
I can if they ask me to, or sometimes it's working in combination with the prop master, and we decide. Sometimes we create it and we run out and we have it all manufactured for us. And in the case of when we were in Budapest, we were sort of limited as to what, manufacturing and stuff could be done. So all of our towers were built to look like food on the base. But if you looked really close, it really wasn't meat per se. There were antlers, and there was a fox head on the top of one of them. Wow. And so we were able to put in other things that are like food adjacent.
Yeah.
and then build the food on top of it.
Right.
And so these towers that had to last, one of the ones that had the most beautiful taxidermy peacock sitting on top of it.
Oh, yeah.
And we had feathers. We had all the things that went with fowl. And then each day we just replaced all of the hens that were around it and all of the different pieces of fowl. So there are ways to get around it. You just have to be able to have the budget and the time to get it done.
Oh, yeah. With enough money and time, you can get around everything, right?
Sure. Well, then, there's the challenge of when you have to do seafood. Okay, that's always like a bone of contention with crew and with actors, because seafood smells. I mean, especially, like 2 days of it or whatever. So
we actually just got done, my team and I, and it took 5 of us with a food truck with a huge amount of refrigeration and freezers that were brought in. And we had 2 identical symmetrical seafood buffets that had to be set up every day. And then at some point during the day of shooting, they all got switched out for the desserts that went in their place. And we did this for 3 days straight. And the food cost was phenomenal.
I bet.
But we threw everything away at the end of the day.
Yeah, and that's the saddest part about prop food.
There was a huge amount of waste on that show, but it was beautiful, and was really fortunate in that set. We shot on location outside next to a lake, and even though we were in a big tent, it was still very open, and there was a lot of airflow. So that, and just running around with a lot of lemon, we were able to knock the smell down pretty well on that one. But the one that I did with you inside, when we shot
the
on
Queen
the Queen
Mary,
that one was a little more difficult, especially because there was no refrigeration in the Queen Mary at the time.
That's one of the things I want to ask you about. I mean, doing food styling on a soundstage is one thing, but can you talk about the challenges of shooting on location, and more importantly, in conjunction with property masters, can you, how can the prop department help you to be more successful?
Yeah, well, and I feel like it's our job to work with you best possible to make you successful.
Yes,
and,
exactly.
Because ultimately, the prop master is
That's
responsible for the food in the scene. Going on location is the tough part. We're fortunate when you stay in LA County. We have, a rental house where we can get everything from propane ovens to, reach-in fridges to pretty much anything you want. And we can build a kitchen pretty much anywhere under a tent as long as you pop a...
Will these companies drop all this equipment at the location for you too?
They will, or you just have Transpo pick it up for you.
Oh, right.
The other options that are available are renting a food truck. Mm-hmm. And I have a relationship with Orlando's, the caterer. And so I use his food trucks.
Nice.
And he's got some very nice equipment, and that's all fairly new. So we have a lot of refrigeration and cooking capabilities. And if there are issues with getting food trucks, sometimes when it's really, really busy, I can't find anybody to rent a truck for me. We could actually build a truck in a 5-ton if we have to. And so we can put in just the equipment that we need. So there's many ways to skin a cat when you're shooting on location, and then figuring out what you can and cannot do on that location.
Right. So that's like surveying the set before you get there, right? That's really helpful.
So on a lot of the bigger shows, when food is working on location, I end up going on the tech scout. I'll talk about what the requirements are, how to keep, especially if people are eating, what we need to do to actually keep things food safe, how close we can get, because then there's the opposite, the issue of sound, because I'm running a food truck, I'm running a generator, so I want to be close to set, but half the time I can't because you can hear it.
Right.
And so it's just making all those logistics work.
Yeah. As far as like doing setups and stuff, and having personnel brought in and everything, do you find you're getting a lot of pushback from production as far as like personnel? I mean, I know personally, like I'm always fighting for you having prep days and the number of people that come in, and I
think the pushback, I feel more pushback on shows that don't have huge scenes. Right. So, maybe there's, maybe it's a normal show where you just have one food stylist come in maybe once an episode, and there's maybe a family meal.
Right.
And then all of a sudden they have a holiday dinner, and they're having 13 people over, they're having 2 tables, you're shooting it over 3 days, and we have the gluten-free people and the keto people and all these different people in the same room, and all of a sudden I say, people are eating. I need 3 people on this team. We need 3 prep days to get it together. I need you to bring in these fridges. We're going to bring these ovens. And I get the biggest pushback on shows like that aren't used to what it takes to do a huge food scene. And they're like, well, we had one person and they shot for 3 hours and they made, whatever it was, chicken marsala, and not quite understanding. On big shows, they usually understand.
Sure. And a lot of that changed probably after COVID, right?
And actually a lot of that, fortunately for me, Local 44 asked me to sit on the industry-wide safety committee, and we went over the protocols to bring people back to work. So, of course, there was a lot of pushback, and there was a lot of fear on behalf of the food stylist, because I started getting an amazing amount of texts saying, people are saying they're never going to do food on set. With COVID going on, there's no way. Well, we were fortunate and able to be able to prove that food actually didn't carry the COVID virus. Right. And in sitting on the industry-wide safety committee, we sat with an epidemiologist every day, and I would sit and I would just do research for hours and hours, and we actually came up with a protocol that worked. And the biggest thing about, COVID and the props on set, which you guys know, was the cross-contamination.
Right.
And so we decided if there was food, and if food was to be eaten, that food needed to be plated, cooked, and put together by a food stylist.
Right.
And if not a food stylist, a prop person who was not responsible for anything other than food, that also had a food handler's license and understood what to do, and that we had our own tented off area. And the biggest thing, there were just little changes, and we worked with it, and it didn't seem to be bad. But if, say there was a parent and they were cooking a meal for a kid, they're at the stove and they put it together and they put the plate in front of the child. Now the child has to eat. There would just be that cowboy switch where the parent did the whole thing, and then boom, the plate that they were eating from was done by the food stylist.
Yeah.
So we just, it's food stylists are sort of like prop masters. We find a way to get to yes, and we know how to make it get done.
That's great. And then these protocols are still in place now, right? That's just like industry standard now, right?
Yes.
So that's something good that came out of COVID, right?
Yeah, it definitely is. I mean, it made people aware. All of the, whether it's cross-contamination from COVID or anything else, it still exists. So if you have an actor who's up there doing a cooking scene and they don't exactly know what they're doing, and they're not putting, utensils in proper places, and they're cross-contaminating things, and, there's cooking chicken and there's raw chicken around, and then they're using that same spoon to throw some rice on a plate. There's sort of issues. So it's nice that you have a food stylist around.
Absolutely.
To take care of all those things for you.
Again, having come up with no food stylists, because again, I started in a secondary market before I came to LA. We didn't have food stylists. We did it all. And it's great. It takes so much off your plate with everything else that you have to do, knowing that somebody is focusing on that and just that. And it also helps, with the actors too, knowing that there's somebody professional there who's taking care of things, because again, we've done some janky food scenes before food stylists were around. So,
and I would say on maybe half the sets where we're given various, allergies or, peculiarities or whatever it is for these actors' styles of eating, I would say about half the time the actor will actually come up and ask questions. They just want to verify it really is gluten-free, or it really is, so there is that sort of nice thing where the prop master, well, I thought I bought it at Whole Foods and it said that it was gluten-free, but I don't know. So now you can actually go up. And there is one show that I won't name, and it's coming back, and one of the leads is celiac. And huge difference between celiac and just, being gluten intolerant.
What is celiac?
So celiac is when you actually have the disease where gluten could kill you. So there's one thing to be gluten intolerant, and gluten intolerance can cause all kinds of things, gassy, whatever those things are. But celiac, if somebody were to have too much, it would be like
it's like a peanut allergy. Yeah.
It could be really bad for them. And so we have a show that they have a night where they go to like kind of this local bar thing all the time, and they have spaghetti night. And so this poor actress that is celiac. So we actually always have 2 food stylists on that day, because there's a whole section that we do all the gluten-free, and everything else is done in a separate section, so that we don't contaminate the 2. And we actually get no pushback on that show for having an extra food stylist on.
Well, yeah, I'm sure if you put up like, it's an easy sell being like, well, they could accidentally die on the production's watch, then they're like, let's do that.
They're going to be rushed to the hospital.
Let's do it your way.
Well, that makes a huge difference when you get production to understand what it is that you're trying to do, and they want to help you, because it's a nightmare when they don't, and you have to fight them, and it's just not fun.
Yeah. I always, sort of joke, but always when I get pushback from UPMs on different things, I go, just remember, I can kill just as many people as an armor gone wrong.
That's true.
You're
not wrong.
if you were to feed bad or tainted food or something to 300 extras sitting there, so you need to be able to give us what we need to do our job.
Right, or your actor, and then they're out. So that's definitely. So one of the things that you also have to do are like a lot of specialty food props, like what we talked about. So what are some of the challenges you've had with that, like creating food? Again, like if you're somebody you have to eat shrimp and you hate shrimp, like an actor that I worked with. That I won't mention too because it'll be in the memoir. But
you can. Luckily, there actually is a vegan shrimp now. That doesn't look
God bless
too bad.
Yeah, it's a great thing we live in California because I feel like there's an alternative to everything here, where maybe you're not going to get in Oklahoma or something. Yeah.
But that's got to be the fun part, right? And sometimes when you have to conjure up something like.
No, it's totally fun. I mean, the part of my favorite part of this job is doing food set in the future. So Picard and Star Wars, and so that's really conjuring up some different kind of food that you're it's coming out of your brain that you're not sure what it's going to be, and you get to use all of your creative vices. So working with Josh Roth, who I know has been here, he was in one of the meals on Boba Fett. He's like, we're going to have a roasted Nuna. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to need a little help with the skeleton on this one.
Roasted Nuna.
And so we were able to get, the shop to actually sort of 3D print the skeleton for me.
Okay.
And then I was able to, I basically used turkey to put it together and to stretch the skin over it and to just cook it. And then when you peeled sort of the skin back, you saw the turkey sitting in there and we could slice it. And it's just, coming up with.
But I'm fascinated by foods that exist in the real world that you have to make fake.
Oh, well,
right. I'm sure you've had to do that in the past.
There actually was a scene, and it was in Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, and there were these huge platters of salmon that needed to come out, and they needed to last like 3 or 4 days. And like you said, as soon as the crew sees fish, their noses go up, and these huge platters that I had been working on of salmon that nobody kind of knew what was going on in the prop department, but yes, we were taking care of business. All of a sudden, these platters go out, and the guy that ran the set told me the second he walked out with them, camera was complaining, oh my God, the smell, this is terrible, how are we going to make it? And he goes, really, it smells that bad? And they're like, oh my God, this is so awful. And he goes, really, because it's papaya.
Nice.
And I had spent with an assistant, we spent like 3 days carving enough papaya, and they just went in and out of the fridge, and they looked beautiful and amazing. They looked just like salmon.
But they're still going to complain about it even without knowing what it is.
They thought it smelled, and then when they found out it was papaya there.
Yeah.
And surprisingly, it was the camera department.
Yeah, surprised.
I didn't say that.
I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm pescatarian. I've never minded fish on set.
Right. Well, I mean, again, I've been on set when seafood is getting old and it does smell. And it's not fun.
I haven't worked on a lot of food shows. Like, I did want to ask you a question of when the few times I have had to hire a food stylist, because I work on a lot of horror and stuff like that.
That's
what I was going to say. Yeah, did you do Santa Clarita Diet? I was going to ask you about like body parts or like blood or hearts and stuff like that. Have you had to recreate a lot of that stuff?
Everything there was actually a different food stylist on Santa Clarita Diet, but I had to fill in a couple times, but none of them were body parts. But I have worked on Yellow Jackets. And I did the final cannibalism scene in that season. And I also worked on True Blood. So I got very good at making body parts and
and so what,
deer guts and all kinds of different things they need to eat.
And so what did you make them out of?
Yeah.
Well, in the case of the deer guts, originally we put something together. We rented from Bischoff, so one of those soft taxidermy deers, and then we just coated the inside. We needed to come up with something, and it was a shapeshifter, and he'd gone out and they'd killed the deer, but then by the time you see him, he's like a person, and he's in his human form, and he's eating all of this. And after we got everything approved by the director, and it was sort of pork based with noodles and all kinds of things to look like entrails, the day before, all of a sudden I went into this panic because the person hadn't been hired. Last I heard was, oh my God, what if this person's a vegan? Right. So I ran out to the Asian store and was able to get a bunch of things like yam noodles. And there's all kinds of different things that exist in Asian markets.
That's true.
That not everyone is used to, that I'm able to like sculpt and color and use to make all these different things. And sometimes it's kind of funny. There was some of the weird things have come up with fake kind of foods or different things I've had to make. I was working on a show in New Mexico. It's called Daybreak. And there was a witch. And the witch, there's a guy who has an infection on his arm. And the witch puts his arm in a bowl of maggots.
Oh,
and
fun.
Because the maggots are, I guess in real life, they would suck the poison out of the wound, I think is what they told me. And so then after the witch does this, she then takes the maggots and she eats them because now she's, got this person's DNA sort of idea. So they actually had animal wranglers there with maggots. And I had made fake maggots. And the person out of gelatin. Okay. And I molded them. I actually got they probably weren't real maggots, but they were about the same size, but they were rubber, and I got them at a fishing tackle store.
Right.
And I made myself a bunch of little molds, and I just poured all these little maggots and made them out of gelatin so that they were hard enough to come out of the mold, and they could hang up, but when they moved, they just all sort of wiggled and jiggled.
That's a tiny mold, too.
And so and it was a mold, and I think it probably had like 50
of them, yeah.
And then I would pour them, and I made a bunch, and I was back doing this in Albuquerque. And the ASPCA was there because they got to make sure you don't harm any maggots during the filming. Right. And it's funny, that was one of a few times in my life that I had to show them, well, these are the maggots she's eating, and and I had to let them take pictures and show them the molds so that they could prove we weren't harming the maggots. And then the other time I had to do that, I was working on Homecoming. And there's a scene where you see a guy, and he's out walking on it's like a chicken coop, and he's out on a telephone call. And then it flashes to them now back in the house, and they have wrung the chicken neck, and they're gutting it.
Yeah.
And one of the actors picks up the chicken guts and hands it to the other actor, and then he tells him to put it in this bowl. Well, of course, we're not going to give him real chicken guts. And I also had to prove that, and we needed a chicken with the head and the feet and the beak and everything still in place. So I had to prove that wasn't killed for me, that was bought for normal, consumption. And so I went down to Chinatown and I got my chicken, and I made all the guts that went in it for them to pick up. And then they look so real that the people from the ASPCA had to come over, had to show them the receipt where I bought the chicken. And then they took pictures of the guts, and they took a picture of it in the chicken, and it really did look real. But then I had everything laid out in little half pans, and then I would put them together for each time he needed to do it in the chicken. And they needed to take pictures of that while it was going on to again prove we hadn't harmed the chicken.
What were the guts? Were the guts molded or something?
Yeah. The guts, I ended up using a sausage casing and a collagen, and I used a collagen sausage casing, and they were stuffed with different things. So some of the chicken entrails look a little yellow, so I stuffed it with scrambled eggs.
Nice. Nice.
And then all of them, and then it had these little purple entrails in it, and I just took some yam noodles, and yam noodles, if you're not familiar with them, they're kind of spongy, and they have a little brown. They have a little bit of speckling to them, but they take color. So it doesn't, when you put it all together in your mind, it's like when you guys do vomit,
Sure, totally.
If you look at it here, it's nothing, but when you see it, being projectile vomited out of someone's mouth, you go, ooh, it's the same thing.
And that's always a challenge. It's got to be too, if you're creating these crazy looking things that are supposed to be one thing, but there's something completely different, but they also have to taste like something. And, and then you have to get past the psychological part with actors too, right?
That's true. I've had to do cockroaches a lot. Yeah. And so, because people have to eat them. And so, and I make mine out of dates.
Nice, that's perfect.
And actors are like, oh, I'm never going to be able to eat another date again. Sorry. And
or maybe they'll take a liking to cockroaches.
Yeah, well, there's always that.
They taste like dates.
That's right.
Do you do molding a lot then too? You started doing things, so yeah.
Sometimes I do my own. Sometimes I, depending on how big or how crazy it is, then I have to run up to HPR or SAT and have them take care of that for me.
With a special food safe, I'm sure.
Yeah, you have to use food grade silicone.
Food grade silicone.
I can make small molds myself, and it depends on what you get. So we did a heart when you were talking about hearts.
Yeah, that's what we did for horror stories too.
We did a beating heart for Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. And the one thing about Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, nothing, even though we did things and they were anatomically perfect and we spent a lot of money to do it, there was always some sort of kitschiness to it. So in this case, she rips the heart out of his chest. And I made this heart, and it was out of gelatin, and we made an anatomically perfect mold, and we made it a little squishy, except special effects then got into it, and they put a light in it, so it was beating.
Oh my God.
So even though all of it was very real and had this great texture, there was a little bit of like silliness that.
Yeah, but that's okay because, again, you went through the hassle of making it look real. And then they added the funny element.
Right.
Whereas if it didn't look real at all and they had a funny element, then it wouldn't work. So. And
then on that same show we did, it's a kind of a silly show that I did so many crazy things for. Because that was the show that I did the salmon for.
Right.
And then we did the cockroaches on that show. And then I did an edible Gila monster. Wow. And so I did my research on it, and it turned out these things have really, really tough skin. It's how they protect themselves. So we were able to find online, somebody had made a cast of a dead one. Like, we didn't do it. We just found somebody who would sell it. And then we took that out, and we had a mold made. And then I had to figure out, and I had kind of a 2-part mold made, and I had to figure out how to make a skin. Mm-hmm. But the guy bites into it, and they wanted it to bleed, and they wanted all the guts to come out. Right. So I had to figure out how to do that, and it was kind of fun. And then, of course, because...
So how did you figure out how to do that?
A lot of trial and error. So it was the exterior was made with basically like if you did a gummy bear,
right,
but just the densest, like he really, in order to bite it, he was really biting into it. But once you got inside, I made little edible blood packs, and again, the collagen, sausage casings come in really handy if you get the real thin ones. And so I had made blood packs that I had put all through it, and then I made guts. And I used tofu. I used silken tofu, and then I put the noodles, and I got everything in it.
So you made it drippy once they get into it.
And then when they, took the bite, then you could see it come out.
What do you use for edible blood? I think that's a big question. I was just going to
ask that too, because staining is an issue.
Staining and the edible blood that they sell is not meant to be really ingested.
Correct. Right? You can get it. So the edible blood that they make, it can go in your mouth like the mouth blood, and you're just not made to drink a bunch of it. And so there's different versions. So on True Blood, I want to say it's been a while now, there were at least 4 different versions of blood. So there was blood that you saw them drinking, and it was just in a cup, and you didn't have to see it close up. And so we used palm cherry to sort of get the red color. Mm-hmm. Then I had wheatgrass mixed with it, because blood's really thick, and you can't see through it. But even in doing all that, it didn't, normal blood, if it was really in a glass and you put it down, and I'll tell you why I know this, it's really crazy, but normally if it was blood, it would kind of slowly run down. It wouldn't be like, just like lemonade, like just come down to a level, or like the palm juice. Yeah. So if they weren't drinking it, I would use regular methicellulose, and if they were drinking it, I would use food-grade methicellulose. And the reason I know that, and it's like this other weird part that ties into my job and why I love doing all the kind of blood and weird stuff, because I thought I was going to be a doctor one day. When I was in high school and college, I had a job in a clinical laboratory, and I was a phlebotomist.
Wow.
So I stuck needles into people every day and drew blood, so I was pretty, so sometimes if I want to be, a little snarky about things, and, they'll start talking about blood, and I'll say, well, is that venous blood or arterial blood? Different color based on, how much oxygen is in it at that point. Yeah, wow. And so, but True Blood was kind of fun. So we had different versions of blood on that show, because some people didn't do sugar. Some people wouldn't do gelatin because they were vegan. So there were all kinds of, and the guys were actually pickier on that show, because if you think about who the guys were, it was Alexander Skarsgård, and he was on the cover of GQ, and Joe Manganiello and Ryan Kwanzaa, and they were like on the cover of Muscle and Fitness, and they had their little 8-packs going on, And so I think they were almost pickier about the food than the girls were, but they would always eat meat. They had no problem with just like a lot of protein.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
And they didn't do the carbs that went with it.
Right.
So there was a lot of eating that happened on that show.
Yeah.
Wow. So you did chef.
So yes, I did.
Talk about that. That must have been a blast, because that's not just food styling. That's like the food's got a character in that show.
Yeah, the food was a character in that show. That was pretty amazing. That was probably the 5 or 6 months in my life where I slept the least. I was sleeping like 3 and 4 hours a night. We had a food truck that would run around with us, and at one point the food truck broke down, and so I actually had to hire my son. I'm probably not supposed to say this. Sure, I had to hire my son as a PA, Bryce, who you know.
Wait. Before we go, you had a secondary food truck side from the food truck in the show.
Oh, yes.
I just want to clarify.
Yes, we had a food truck that we worked out of that wasn't the broken down food truck that they made that looked so beautiful.
Not the picture car.
There's a lot of parallels here.
Yeah, the picture car didn't really have much in it that worked, except the big plancha. That was like a new plancha that we bought for it that did. But there was at one point and it was just like punt at the last minute, the brakes gave out on the food truck, and we were shooting on Abbott Kinney, and we couldn't move, and the truck was like 10 or 12 blocks away from where the food needed to work. So I hired my son, who at the time was not in the union but was an amazing skateboarder, and we would fry up the food and hand it to him, and he would skateboard 10 or 12 blocks down and hand it to the prop guy, and then he'd bring me back the empties in the cold, and he just made rounders, and he just thought he had life made. He was getting paid to skateboard all day.
Got a good workout that day
on Abbott Kinney.
Yeah, so that's fantastic.
It was a fun day, but that was really a great show. I remember when I interviewed with Roy Choi and was hoping to get the show, and I basically just said, look, you're an amazing chef, and there's no one that knows food trucks better than you. But what I'm bringing to the table is I've done movies before, and you never have, so I can help you translate your ideas to screen, what's going to last, how it's going to work, how we can make this work on location, what we're going to do. And it was a really great partnership with Roy. He was really amazing. And then to watch him work with, Favreau and Cannavale and Leguizamo, and really help them get in their heads what a chef feels, when they're cooking and why they do things. And the one thing on that show, he wanted all the food real. He said, look, these background people are in here, and they are in this, great restaurant Galois, and they need to be reacting to this amazing food. So give them something to react to. So that was the one show that I worked on. One of the highest budgets that I ever had, because all the food was real.
It's called chef, for God's sake.
It all needed to be edible. And then the other side of that equation was that Favreau at the time was a big proponent of, and especially because Roy was involved, that there would be no waste at all. And so at any given time, I had 3 or 4 of those 6-foot folding tables around, and I bought a case of extra little, the plastic grocery type bags.
Nice.
And when we would get done at the end of the week, take
Doggy bags.
whatever.
Nice.
And it was everything from getting rid of extra kale and onions and cheese to I literally found a home for 2 almost 300-pound pigs, because the first pigs we bought weren't big enough, and they sent me back for a bigger pig. And it turns out that one of the crew was Filipino, and there was a big family thing that was coming up, and they made pork and Lejeune, and it was amazing.
That crew ate well.
That crew really did. And then nothing also was wasted, while we were shooting. The day that we made the grilled cheese sandwich scene, I'm going to guess we made probably 300 to 400 grilled cheeses that day. Some were just to get it right. Some were because we were doing inserts. Some were because they were going to eat them. And some were just the crew was standing there really hungry. But literally nothing would go to waste. We would fry one up. I
love that.
We would fry one up on the griddle, and they were just doing on the insert, and there would be a line waiting. Oh, that one's mine. And then the next one, we'd do that one. I want that one.
Nice.
And
yeah, that always bothers me, throwing out food from shows.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
yeah, me too.
So
I always try to take home as much as I can when we have the food days for that reason.
Yeah.
At least anything that I will eat, I'll bring it home and freeze whatever.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
So did you work with the actors as well as far as technique and stuff?
Yeah, we did. I was very, very fortunate that on some of the big scenes, like when we were in that main restaurant in Galway restaurant, almost every single one of the background in the kitchen was a trained chef. They either came,
cool.
we were shooting at the old Citrus restaurant, so some of them came from Citrus, and some of them came from Roy's restaurant, and then a couple of them were friends of mine. And to this day, a bunch of them are still signed up with Extras Casting, with Central Casting. And something will come up and we'll have a show and they'll be like a Chinese chef. And I'll be like, okay, you got to call this guy. He's with, Central Casting and he can do exactly what you want to do.
Yes. Speaking of that, are there things that you farm out that you don't do, like wedding cakes and stuff like that?
For the most part, wedding cakes. Can I do it? Sure. Do I want to do it? It wouldn't be worth the money. If you can go to, a bakery and they can make you 2 identical wedding cakes and each one is like $1,000. By the time you buy me all the ingredients and you stick me in a kitchen for at least a week to get it all together, it's not really worth the money.
Sure.
There is a food stylist I do use for a lot of my cakes, Molly Reese.
Molly,
Molly. She's a trained pastry chef, and her stuff is amazing. And so I use her for a lot. And then there are some people that sort of specialize in cakes for the industry, but they're not union. So a lot of times I'll have them make them, and then just one of us will handle them when they're on set. Right. And if they're fake, I did a show a few years ago. It was a pilot. It was called Before the Wedding or something like that. And it was everything leading up to the wedding. And this poor cake had to sit there. We shot that pilot for like 3 weeks. And so we basically had a fake cake made and there was only one layer that was real. And I would take the 2 apart and put it in. And then when we weren't using it, I'd put the fake layer back in. And we just redid that cake a bunch of times. So there's a bunch of ways.
Do you do sushi or do you bring in a sushi chef?
Sushi chef.
Thank you.
Sushi chef.
This is why I can't do 2 back to back, Mike.
I'm here for you though.
If you want something that's like super, super high end and really precision and great looking, I'll bring somebody in. If you want something that looks like someone did it at home, that's kind of what I do and what I'd grown up with.
We used to do. I haven't done it in a while. We used to do home sushi nights. And, and doing. We always had fun with it. It's a lot of work. It's a lot harder than you think it would be.
No, it is a lot of work. And for somebody, if you can bring in somebody and they do it.
Well, and that's the thing. You don't have to do every little thing. Just like our prop masters, we don't have to. We bring somebody who's an expert. You still have the expertise of how that's going to play on set. Correct. So, and that's where that will come in. So.
So it's the same thing. And if there's something that honestly we can go someplace else and get, and it's going to save, and it's going to look just as good, and it's going to save you a day of my time, and I can buy it for a third of that, you might as well do it. Things like wedding cakes or anything where it would just be, can we do it? Yeah, I've got a team full of people that have amazing skills, but it's not worth what you'd have to pay us when there's, you go to a bakery that specializes in that, and they knock them out for, pretty reasonable. Yeah. Though during the strike, I did do a couple of wedding cakes, and I just as gifts to people because we didn't have a lot of money, but I had a lot of time. Right. So my wedding gift was the cake.
The cake, nice. Wow, that's good. So, in researching period food,
yes.
What's your process for that?
Some of my favorite. It depends on exactly what the food is and what the time period is. I have a pretty extensive collection of cookbooks going back 30s. I have a few, and prior to that, I have a few. But from like the 40s to probably present, but 40s to 70s is the bulk of mine. And I really bulked those up when I was working on Mad Men. Because Matt Weiner was the show creator, was very, very particular about everything being absolutely spot on. And we recreated a lot of restaurants, so we worked right off their menus, and we would research and find their menus, and then we could find, photographs or, drawings or depictions. Sometimes if you, go back far enough where there weren't necessarily pictures, there were still descriptions of the food, how it was served in certain places. And we bought, and I just every time I would see a cookbook from like the 40s, 50s, 60s that I thought would sort of, be either Americana or sort of leaning towards upscale, I would pick it up. So I have a crazy amount. And then right after I did Mad Men, I was really fortunate. I started getting the calls for like Aquarius and them and all these different shows that were set in
How many seasons of Mad Men did you do?
I came in partway through season 3. I think I came in maybe the second episode of season 3, and I stayed till the end.
Wow, that was a big show.
Yep. When you get a cookbook that's like from the 30s and the 40s and stuff like that, and you're going through it, are there some like ingredients in there that like just isn't
lard?
Yeah, that or just that doesn't exist anymore. Yeah, that you have to figure out or.
I don't think I've come across anything that doesn't exist anymore. I think I've just come across things that people don't use as much, but you can pretty much source anything. And then the one thing about food styling would be that it needs to look the same. It doesn't need to exactly taste the same. So if you have something that was going into it, if you had to put some sort of canned or flaked fish or something weird that you may not really want anyone to eat anyway, it's white. You can't tell the difference.
Right. What's like your go-to dish if somebody say, "Hey, make me something great to eat on set"? I mean,
great to eat when? For what?
Well, like
for
on
breakfast.
Set. Well, I mean, because like for me as a property master, it's like if I'm going to have food in a scene, I want it to be like spectacular, and I want people to like it. Do you have like a specialty thing that you?
No, we actually made some chicken marsala that looked pretty damn tasty the other day.
It looked tasty, or it was?
No, it was tasty. But it looked really great the way that we put it together. Pasta sometimes looks really, really amazing on set if you do it right.
Sure.
So, nothing beats a great tomahawk, especially when it's like, medium rare and you're cutting it all up and you see it. But if it's just going to be a big hunk of meat on the plate, it's not so exciting. So it's just all in the presentation, I think.
Have you run into situations where the actors eating the food and they eat too much of it, and then they have to keep, reconstituting that, matching it?
I would say the two that I remember the most, one was recent and one was a long time ago, but on Mad Men, they had a couple different kids play Don Draper's son. There were a couple different Bobbies, and it was the first time I was working with one of the new ones, and he had to eat meatballs. And so we had plenty of meatballs, and they actually were pretty damn tasty, and they were homemade and everything they needed to be. But I told him, I said, don't eat a lot because you're going to have a lot of coverage. You have 4 people in this scene with you. And I was trying to explain to him, you're going to have to I love meatballs. He kept saying, I love meatballs. I go, honey, you're going to make yourself sick. And didn't really listen to me. And he ate meatball after meatball. That poor kid probably went through at least 60 or 70 meatballs and didn't have to eat the whole thing. Like, got a bite of it. At some point went from eating the whole one to just getting half.
Right.
And, if he wasn't in the coverage, he was like, doing a little bit if he was off the side. And he seemed fine and said thank you. And then the next time I worked with him, his mom told me that he puked his guts out.
Oh, bet.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Speaking of which, for the people, the uninitiated that listen to the show, talk about the spit bucket.
Oh.
The spit bucket. I don't think we've talked about the spit bucket ever.
It was funny. This actually just came up. I did the show Brother Son. That with Michelle Yeoh that just came out on Netflix, and I was doing an interview and they were asking me about the churros, because in that show there's this huge thing with churros, which is another one of the times when somebody ate way too much, and somebody older as an actor who should have known better, but just went churros. Oh my God. And they were very good and just ate too many. And then pretty soon we're like, well, you got to keep eating. Oh, I can't eat anymore. No, you're the one that ate them and we're still doing it. So you get to eat more.
You didn't have to do this.
So it came up when I was doing an interview about that. And it's that quick thing where, you're trying to think of what you should and shouldn't say.
Right.
And so you brought it up, spit bucket, so I'll talk about what it is. But in that particular case, this was for one of those fandom sites they had. And I had to make the quick decision whether telling the uninitiated just fans of a show that there was actually this thing called a spit bucket that they could take a bite and then spit spit it out into. And so I decided I wasn't going to tell normal people about the spit bucket.
But to the regular person, it sounds disgusting unless you're, but to an actor on set, it's like the most relieving thing in the world.
It is a saving grace. And so you were talking about shrimp earlier. When I worked on Superstore, there was this girl, she wasn't allergic to shrimp, but she just could not stand it. And damn it, if 2 or 3 times over the course of the show, they kept making this girl eat shrimp. And so there was a wedding reception she was at, and they have her scripted to go up and get this huge piece of shrimp. And we could just not get that. We had that spit bucket as close as could be, but the coverage would linger on the girl. There's only so long that you can chew something before you don't have to swallow. And I just felt so sorry for this girl because it's the one thing she said she didn't want to do. And a lot less was in the spit bucket than she'd wanted because she had just had to chew for so long.
Right. So, yeah, just in case, again, for those who don't know, the spit bucket sits next to the actor during the scene, and then they're eating the food, and the minute they yell cut, they lean over and spit it out.
Yeah. And a lot of times, like you said, like that spit bucket won't fill up till about, or have anything in it till about halfway through the scene or the day, because the first few times they're good, but then they fill up quick.
And so on Brother's Son, there were these churros, and we didn't even have a spit bucket when we started the scene because we thought, he'll take a bite, or he can just hold it up. He doesn't even have to really take a bite. But of course, he decided to have 3 or 4 bites, and then over and over and over. And
it's a rookie move.
Yeah. And he's not, and that was the killer thing. He wasn't a rookie. He just said he really liked churros.
Yeah. I did a movie once with Amanda Plummer, and she was supposed to be sitting at a bar eating a burger. Oh. And Billy Bob Thornton comes up to her and abuses her, basically. And so I said to her, so Amanda, what kind of burger do you want? You want like a beef, a turkey, a vegan burger, or what? She goes, Jell-O. I was like, what? She goes, Jell-O. I'm like, you want a Jell-O burger? She goes, no, I just want Jell-O. Just bring me a cup of Jell-O. I'm like, why? She goes, because I could eat Jell-O all day. I'm like, okay. So I said to the director, she wants to eat Jell-O. He goes, I don't give a shit. Let her eat what she wants. I'm like, fine. So that's what she did. And that was like a pro move right there.
Yeah. And she could handle it.
She could handle it. She did.
She didn't lie.
Like so much Jell-O. It was insane.
Well, and then Jell-O reminded me, and it takes me back to the question that you asked earlier about sort of the mind-food connection for these actors when we make fake foods. So in True Blood, there was a human character that married a vampire. And of course, vampires don't eat. Yeah. And the vampire was the female, and the human was the male. And they get in a fight. And during the fight, he says, you never cook for me. And she says something like, the smell of your food makes me sick. You want me to cook? I'll cook. She goes over to the oven and she throws a pan down and she turns the flame on and she takes eggs and she just throws them like shells and everything into this pan. And he's like, fine, I'll eat it. So I had to make something that looked like an egg
and shells.
An egg for this actor to eat that was raw. And so the easiest thing for me to do was to make it out of gelatin.
Yeah.
And so it had...
And pudding.
Yeah, so it had... I made the yolks, and they were nice and yellow, and then the white around it, and it was all made in gelatin. And then it had just a little whatever I used for some sort of like runniness. I don't even remember what it was now, over the top of it. And he just had to sit there and eat. And he said he just had the hardest time because he was expecting an egg and it was sweet.
Right. Exactly.
And so it was that one thing where I didn't make the connection. I was like, oh, sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, it's called acting.
Yeah, that's right. But they looked really good.
Yeah, that makes a big difference.
But he said it was hard because it was sweet. And it was just, he said, so that's the first time when he ate it, it was like, it was a little bit.
I've always found that the favorite on-screen actors for them to actually physically be eating is French fries. Because that's one that you can just keep going and going and going. And they're small enough that you can do it each take with just eating a couple each take.
Right.
You know?
It's like lettuce, everybody wants to eat salad, because they can just take little bites and stuff.
And it's not affecting salad, won't affect the whole thing either. So, yeah.
Yeah, but French fries are great.
Mm-hmm. Well, my funny story on the salad part is I was doing a commercial with and the main talent was a basketball player. And he has whatever disease it is that makes him take a specific type of medication. And this medication that the commercial was for, and it's really bad that I don't know the name of it, but it was the first one of its type that would allow you to eat greens. And I don't know what the thing was he had. And so it required him, he came over, he saw everybody, he sits down at a table, and he's supposed to just pick up his fork, take a stab at the salad, and take a bite. He could not deliver his line, stab the salad, and take a bite. So I sat underneath the table right where he was, and he would sit down and pick up the fork, and then I would hand up a fork with salad on it, and he would take the bite.
Can't walk and chew gum at the same time.
And it was a basketball player, so it was,
Yeah, he didn't have to have any coordination at all.
It was just he wasn't expected to act the same way. So
it's an uncomfortable world for them. I mean, and you also have, I mean, I get it. You're playing basketball. You're probably zoned in. Acting, it's like you have a bunch of people and lights just staring at you while you're trying to, stab the salad and eat it and deliver the line.
It always fascinates me, the off-camera stuff.
Yeah, so the food,
like
food
when you're
stuff.
under the table handing stuff off to actors. And
Oh,
stuff.
yeah.
I totally appreciate actors who, what they have to do. Okay, because doing stage acting is one thing, but film, it's just so odd. It's so not natural in any way, and they make it and they pull it off. I'm impressed.
Yeah, I agree.
It's pretty funny. So, what's your biggest disaster that's ever happened to you?
Oh boy, that's a good question.
Okay, and he'll vouch for this is real.
Okay.
Am I allowed to say who it was for? I was doing the movie Hail Caesar.
Oh, right.
And
Okay. With the Coen brothers.
Yes, and I was already a little nervous about the Coen brothers.
Sure.
Who turned out to be very nice and fine.
But they're the Coen brothers.
Right. So a little nervous. Everything has to be perfect, and it's the scene with George Clooney, and it's they're in the old times where like the Caesar crown. I'm really bad. I don't know.
Roman era.
Yeah, Roman era. So they're back in the Roman era, and they're supposed to be this amazing feast. It's about a 12-foot long table, and we've decided it has full-size turkeys. And yes, there were turkeys in Roman times.
Interesting.
It has these full-size turkeys all around. It was supposed to have a huge pig in the middle. I had no way of cooking this pig, and I was I had food leading all the way up to it, plus I had to prep everything else and all the turkeys that went with that. So we hired a catering company to do it, and I kept following up, and luckily for my own protection, I CC'd the prop master on every single email I sent, trying to follow up on the cost and when it would be ready, and we would be there to pick it up. And I went with the assistant prop master, and her and I went over to pick it up, and he did not have this big 200-pound pig that I asked for. He had a little tiny suckling pig.
Oh, no.
So to me, that felt like I thought I was going to get fired. I thought, I just thought, oh my God, I ruined the scene. And then luckily there were enough other things that we were able to put together and to add in there. And there were extra turkeys, and there was big fish, and we made it look very opulent. But to me, that was the biggest disaster.
Sure.
But,
you have to do forced perspective, just shove that pig in the camera.
And then the bottom line was nobody else knew it was supposed to be a huge pig except me and probably the director and the prop master. And there were enough people that knew.
But it's still...
So to me, that was to this day, I still get crap from him about the pig.
Who, the prop master? Yeah. Were they eating in the scene and digging in or anything like that?
They were eating, but they were never supposed to eat the pig.
Yeah.
Right, the pig was just a...
So I was wondering, would it have been something where you might be able to run to a prop house and just get a fake one as a rental and throw it in, or you get too close to it to know it would be fake?
Yeah. None of them really look that good. ISS
That's
has
fair.
one that.
And you thought it was going to be there.
Yeah, I mean we're shooting.
Fair.
We're shooting on location, actually we were on stage that day. But we start at 7 a.m.
Sure.
There's no.
There's no pig.
There's no quick pig solution. You get Greg Bilson on his motorcycle with a pig.
Getting the pig.
I would pay to see that, actually.
But we've actually
had that.
The ones they have at ISS, we've sort of greased them
Sure.
up and put all kinds of things around them, and from 15 feet away, they look fairly real.
Right.
Yeah.
Still not great.
Totally. I mean, you gotta have real in that case.
Yeah. What
That feels like my biggest disaster, though.
Which is still it's lesson than most
I was
people
gonna say.
yeah.
I mean, there's in the moment anything, even like the food truck breaking down, and
Right.
I can't get the food to set, and those all every single time something like that happens, they all feel like my biggest disaster.
Exactly. And that's the thing. And because you're a pro, you make it happen. You get the kid on your kid on a skateboard and go. You know what I mean? It's like that's the kind of stuff that history's made from. That I mean, again, it's no fun in the moment.
Right.
You feel like you're dying.
Yeah,
But-
you totally do.
But then we keep going back, so something's seriously wrong with us, right? I mean, come on, what the thing we put ourselves through. So,
Or
what's your
torture.
favorite kind of styling? Having done it all,
It's really a toss up whether I go back in period food, like
Mm-hmm.
turn of the century. Like I had such an amazing time in Budapest and recreating that old amazing food and the everything that was made available to me while I was there. Or I can literally switch to the future. Like I'm doing Boba Fett and just doing food that looked like it came from another world was really
it's fun.
amazing. Yeah.
What is it like working in Budapest or on location or especially out of country where you don't have things like you would typically have here, like a food truck or refrigerators to come, or even a lot of the ingredients and stuff that you might be able to find easily accessible here? Like, what's that like?
So you can find a workaround. So much like even in Pittsburgh, the first film that I did in Pittsburgh, really in LA, we're the only place that has something like Rick Enterprises, which is where
Right,
we get all
right.
of our
Right.
commercial cooking equipment from, and they'll deliver, and they have everything from sinks and ovens
Yep.
and reach and fridges. When you get out of LA, there isn't that
No.
for the most part. So you find a way to make it work. So when we were in Pittsburgh, we called one of those rent-to-own places.
Oh,
And we literally built a kitchen, and we were totally honest. We are going to rent this for the 3 months that I'm here, and I never want to own it, But you find ways to make it work.
What was it
And-
that you did in Pittsburgh?
It was called Love the Coopers. Except when I left in December, it was called Let It Snow, and it was 2 degrees, and they let it snow so that by the time I finally came home in late March, it was -20.
Wow.
And this little California girl never wants to see -20
oh
again.
no.
I know it's no
Yeah.
fun.
And it was hard working in that.
Yeah.
And we went in, it was one of the first movie incentives when they first put it in place that we went in on. And so the infrastructure really wasn't there yet. And we were in, I think it was Westinghouse, but I'm not sure. It was an old manufacturing building, but it had been vacant for so long that the heaters didn't work.
Of course.
So along with all of my equipment, I also had space heaters in front of every single piece of equipment just so my toes would stay warm. And there were literally warming huts on the stage set up, little warming tents for the actors. 'cause
Of course.
It was so cold.
That's the thing, man. God, that's the hardest part. That's what I mean about location. It's just such a different animal.
Right.
I
But
mean,
you
because you
can,
never know what you're going to have to
Yeah.
work with, but.
but
some-
again, much like prop masters, food stylists, or at least those of us that travel, I mean, that's part of the stuff that we like is figuring out,
Yeah,
how to
exactly.
make
It's
it
like
work.
a MASH unit.
So in Budapest, I was very fortunate. The prop master that I worked with was Ellen Freund, and she's very much a foodie, and she was very much aware of what we would need. And so she had a lot of things already put in place before I got there. And at one point, we just realized we had to have a food truck, and they're nothing like the food trucks that we have here. But I got a little refrigeration, and I had an oven, and I had some burners, and we were able to make it work.
How did you find a food truck out there?
A Hungarian guy that was working with us. We're like, come on, somebody's got to have a friend. Somebody's got to
Right.
have a. Somebody had a friend who had a friend who had a friend who had a food truck, and made it work.
Made it happen.
I think he had a catering company or something, and it wasn't the best food truck. There were a lot of problems with it.
Sure.
But I think the hardest part, especially on that show, about being on location was that not only is the food different there, but we were doing food from the 1800s. So things, cuts of meat were different. They were different sizes. So we had to do research on, what would a steak look like in the 1800s? Well, it's not in New
Right.
York, and it's definitely not like the big tomahawks and the great
Right.
big huge
Yeah,
things that we
sure.
have now. When I was working on... Oh, it's when I was working on, what was it's Winning Time.
Winning Time.
There we go.
When I was working on Winning Time, something came up, and they needed the guy to be eating a big steak, and they wanted to say, like, you know, he was like, you know, he had so much money and he was so wealthy and he owned this, you know, the Ocotillo Lounge, and so he should have a steak. And the director goes, it should be like a big steak, like a tomahawk. And I'm like, excuse me. They wouldn't have had a tomahawk back then. That's not the, you know, we would have big steaks, but it wouldn't have been that.
Yeah.
So we did a porterhouse,
right,
which would have been the big steak back in the day. So it's little things. Would most people notice? Maybe not, but there's enough foodies and enough chefs and enough people out there. You got to make sure you get all the details right. So we did all that homework and research, and I love doing it. And we're really fortunate resources at the New York Library. There's a woman that had donated, I guess she had saved all of her cruise ship menus.
Wow.
And there are
That's
all
cool.
of these period cruise ship menus, which, you know, when you think about food on a cruise, it is the best food of the day. Like they're trying to impress you. You're on this trip. It's, you know, it's a lot of money.
Yeah,
so it's
elegant.
a really, it's a really great resource for upscale food. And they have all the menus there.
Wow. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So I just did last year when 1923 they came to LA and they shot their big cruise ship on the Queen Mary in Long Beach. So they were just here for like a week. And we had to do the meal. And so, you know, again, it was New York Public Library, pulled out all the things and did a kind of a similar menu to the Titanic.
Yeah, and that's a fun load in. At the Queen Mary.
Yeah.
I hate shooting on that ship.
Have you had to do it more than once? Yeah. Twice.
Well, now, since we shot there together last, the Queen Mary is now, they've got all their kitchens back up and running.
Right.
Really?
And they've got their rooms so that they have redone the whole thing. They like buoyed it up so it's not like sitting down so low. And they've rehabbed a lot of the rooms. So now the kitchen is pretty good.
Oh, okay.
And much better than when we worked there. Nothing worked at all. Now there's running water and there's like even hot water.
Yeah, we shot once. They had to do a cafeteria scene in a prison at Sybil Brand. You ever shoot at that god awful place?
I was
shut
just
down
there.
prison.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Oh wait, where?
It's in downtown LA or
no.
I bet I've worked at the one in Lancaster.
I just did the Lancaster one.
Yeah.
Take it back.
It's like East LA or something like that. And literally there's no running water in there. We were like on the 4th story of it. It's just never fun.
Yeah, we were just at the one in Lancaster, and there's like a closed part to the one in Lancaster, and then there's like the newer part, and same thing, a lot of equipment that doesn't work and just old and dirty.
Oh yeah, super dusty.
Yeah, it's just grody. I'll tell you what, they should bring every middle school kid to Sybil Brand and let them see a cell. That would scare any kid straight. I mean, people that have to stay in those cells. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, well, that's why they like to film there. So
yeah, for sure. Wow. So, if there was one thing, I know this is kind of like putting you on the spot here without having time to think about it, that you would tell like a new up and coming prop master, you know, to help you help them, what would that be? I mean, the thing that you run into all the time that you feel like, you know, oh man, if you just done this, if you do, you know, what advice can you give people to help you, you know, to be successful?
I think for the newer guys, they need to remember that, you know, food allergies are a big thing. And so find out the dietary restrictions right off the bat, and then find out, you know, especially if we're doing stage work, find out where a kitchen can be set up and where things can be kept clean and food safe. And, you know, we're here to help you guys as prop masters. It's our job to make you look good. If we don't make you look good, then we haven't done our job. And so just as much information, whether it's giving us script pages, knowing if you have a budget in mind ahead of time. A lot of times I'll get from people, oh, don't worry, money's not an option. And then when you show up with $2,000 worth of receipts, I'll be like, oh, what the hell? You know, so that would be a nice thing to know. I also have some prop masters, and I know in their mind they think they're doing the right thing, and they'll just be like, the person hasn't been cast yet. It shoots next week. I just want you to have every single kind of version possible of that thing available, whether it's vegan, whether it's gluten-free, whether it's, you know, I can only do so many things, especially within your budget.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
It's just giving us as much information as possible.
Well, cool. You got anything else, Mikey?
No, I don't think so.
I know it's scary looking down that.
So-
There's a lot of
IMDb.
stuff here. Yeah,
I know.
You've been working on so much stuff, and you were the one even through this like slowdown. I don't know. You're still always busy. You just don't stop.
Well-
So if you're this busy when it's so slow, like how do you manage working when it's very busy?
I have the most amazing team that I couldn't do it without, and I
Yeah.
have 6 or 7 people around me at any given time. And the great thing about my team is that we bring so many different aspects of cuisine together. We have Asian, we have French, we have one of the guys was a manager at Bel Campo, and he knows meat forwards and backwards, and has butchered, and I just feel we're like this amazing team that can bring it together. So a lot of times I'll get people and they'll just be like, oh, the actor's really used to you, and can you come in?
Right.
And I'll be like, honestly, I have another guy that does that cuisine better.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so, I promise all the prop masters that we'll always be available. I'll make sure you're always covered. But and I understand wanting the continuity, especially when you're working with an actor. So I just did a show where one of the actors went from having a food truck to actually having now his own upscale restaurant. And I trained the actors, and I trained everybody, all the sous chef and everybody else that was in the kitchen on knife skills, and I got everything up and running. And so it did feel important that I was always there because those people were looking to me specifically. But if you have a show and, one specific character is doing, a specific type of food, and I have someone better than,
Sure.
one of, the person who is normally there, I try to make sure that's the person that's there.
So let's talk about that before we go, is because you're not like, as a food stylist, you do more than one show at a time.
The food stylists are the proverbial day player.
Right.
And in any given week, depending on how it goes, you can do 3 or 4 different shows.
Right.
And so in order, and if you want to keep yourself busy, the only way to keep yourself busy and not let your prop masters down is to have a team.
Yes.
And I have a team that is just amazing to me.
Yeah, and it makes all the difference in the world because the food could be great, but if it's not like there and ready on time, that's a huge problem. And being able to interact with the crew as well as the actors. I mean, it's a skill set for
Right.
sure.
And I definitely have been working with my team. Most of them came up through reality. So they really don't know the episodic world, and they don't know budgeting, and they don't know exactly, how to read a call sheet or how to break down a script. And so I work with them so that they can, sort of at some point they'll be independent and be able to do it all on their own. Because again, if you get used to working with me all the time and I'm not available, I need to make sure whoever's, in my place that day gives you the same sort of
Right.
feedback you get with me.
Yeah, there's a range. Like I've worked with so many different food stylists all across the board, and just like assisting and stuff. And there's such a range of how each of them works.
Right.
Like there's some that they show up and like you could assist them a little bit, but they don't need anything from everybody else. They're going to get the food in front of the actor. They're going to explain everything to the actor. They're going to do all the resets with the food. They're going to be there. There's some people that just show up and just want to hand off the food.
Right.
And they're just like, here.
Just wait to be told what to do.
Yeah, I'm
which
going to
is
stay here.
insane.
Here's your dish. Throw it in. You know what I
Right.
mean? So
Right.
it's like there's a lot of range
Yeah.
between who you're working with.
And I can also say from our standpoint, there's a huge range as to what the set master wants you to do.
Right.
I have some people that want it's food, you handle it, you do it best, you make sure that resets right. I'm going to do the beverages, I'm going to do the newspaper, I'm going to do all these other things. And I have other people that want me to hand them the reset,
Right.
or they want me to prepare them like a little dish or, container. I have these little things that look like bento boxes, and it has all the
Right.
little things
Yeah.
in it.
Resets.
And they go out and reset themselves because they don't want a sunset. They
Right.
feel that it's a distraction or we're in the way because there's too many other people in
Sure.
the tight quarters. And so we've got that range too.
Yeah.
And we, with my team, we'll be whatever you want us to be. If you're one of those people that wants us in there, we'll handle it. If you just want us to have that plate ready when you walk off the set, we'll just hand you the next
Yeah.
one to walk in with.
That's great.
Yeah. You do drinks and cocktails and stuff too, right?
And we will.
Yeah.
If a lot of times, prop people like to handle that, and it's fine. One of the people on my team has been a bartender before, so she's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And but like when I work with Brad Einhorn, he is always having me come up with these fancy cocktails, and we just came up with we did I guess it was an engagement party. And so there were like the specialty drinks that the bride had put together. And we created them, we made them, but then on the day, and I had everything ready, I just handed it over to the prop people and showed them how to do it. But yeah.
I got one more question I think is going to be Chris's favorite question here.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Tell us your thoughts on fake ice.
Well, I love fake ice. Son of a bitch.
There's good fake ice and
That's
there's
right.
bad fake ice, and there's sometimes so this seafood buffet that I was just telling you about that we had to do for days and days on end, it all had to look like it was on crushed ice, but we had to move everything in and out. And honestly, we just decided that we had a big enough budget that anything that people were going to eat would never ever be out. We would plate it, and we actually just used polysorb for all the crushed ice, and we covered it with so much kale and lemon and everything on top of the seafood you really couldn't tell the difference.
Yeah, and in that application, fake ice works really well. And especially, like if you have to do a whole bin, then you put the bubble wrap down first and then the ice on top of it. Otherwise, you'd go broke.
Oh, yeah. I've done the ice baths, too, which it's fantastic when you do it that way, too. But you can't drink anything with that ice in it.
Exactly.
I have actually I was on a show in New Mexico, and they had to have all of these fancy drinks. They were all supposed to look really tropical, and it was like July, and it was 110, and there was no way to keep them good. And they literally decided that Prop Master said, we're going to make them all with polysorb, and we're going to tell people this will kill you, do not drink it. I got to tell you, those drinks look good for like days, and we would just put new garnish on them. Not particularly what I would do. For background?
I was going to say
just
background.
for background.
Yeah.
But we told them, do not drink this, you'll die. Like, don't even try and pretend, because a little piece will go up the stomach.
Yeah, and the polysorb looks good, and that's the thing, is you just can't drink it.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. We got to figure that one out. Yeah. Make $1 million.
Okay, I'll get on it right now. Let's do this, and we can retire.
Yeah. So before I let you go, I have to ask you about The Bear. Do you watch that show?
I do watch that show.
What do you think about all that?
You know what? I only watched the first season.
Okay.
And I really did like it. And I felt like they definitely got into the head of a chef. And I liked how, the one guy that was doing like all the bake stuff, and he would put up his little vision board, his little inspiration. And I kind of liked all the little pieces that went to it.
Yeah, they did a beautiful job, I thought.
And what kind of drives you to want to do that? Because honestly, most restaurants are probably more like that than something really fancy, and you really do struggle, and it's really hard to make money, and it's really hard, and especially now to have good help, and with minimum wage going up everywhere, and it's getting harder and harder. I was thinking, we're on strike, and I walked by Panda Express a couple weeks ago. Do you know that there's like managers there make like $30-some an hour plus a bonus? So but that also shows you how hard it is for these small restaurants to sort of compete and stay open. So
absolutely.
I think the Bear sort of gets into all those different things. And people have different ideas about food and where they're going with it, and why you see the struggle there.
Yeah, I know a lot of people saw that and were like, that's not real. I'm like, yeah, it kind of is, from what I understand.
Sure.
Yeah, a lot of it felt very real.
So cool. Well, Melissa,
that was fun.
That was fun. Thank you so much for coming out and shedding some light on the very intense part of what we do.
Oh, yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
And just one of the little intense parts of what you do. You guys have so many things that fall underneath you that, we're glad that we can be there to take this little part away.
Trust me, we appreciate you more than you know.
Good.
Absolutely. So, Mikey.
Right on. I want to just plug again the thing that we have going on. We just opened up the associate membership. Talked about it a little bit last one, but since we have food stylists on this episode, I just want to throw Property Masters Guild is now open to food stylists as well to come in and apply as an associate member, as well as armorers, assistant prop masters, prop assistants, sales associates, anything basically in relation alignment with the props department. You are now we're welcoming you. We want you to come hang out with us and help uplift the craft of props and the world we're in. So if you want to apply, if you're a prop master and want, we still want you. If you,
we definitely want you.
Yeah, we definitely want you if you're a prop master. So go ahead to propertymastersguild.org, and then you'll be able to find under the membership area on how to apply and do under those classifications. So, check us out there. Thank you, everybody, for tuning into another episode of Prop Talk, the official podcast of the Property Masters Guild, brought to you by real working and retired prop masters. If this is your first time listening, please make sure to like, subscribe, and comment wherever you're hearing this. We're also on YouTube, so do all the stuff there and watch us. If you would like to know more information on the Property Masters Guild, or if you have a question for us here at Prop Talk, go to propertymastersguild.org, or you can send us an email at info@propertymastersguild.org. Follow us on all the socials @_the PMG. We're on Facebook and all the other ones too. So, I think that'll do it. Let's.
Nice.